Duale says that MPs may postpone voting on gender bill, and he says that the bill that had been scheduled for vote on Wednesday afternoon is likely to be postponed to allow room for lobbying. And of course, the bill seeks to amend Article 97-98 of the Constitution to introduce special nominations laws for women MPs. And now the question that I would ask you is that over the weekend we saw the women run as several female leaders, including Cabinet Secretary for Education, Ambassador Amina Mohammed. We saw Esther Passaris, woman representative for Nairobi. We saw former presidential candidate and also former governorship candidate in Kirinyaga County, Martha Karua, coming out so strongly to advocate for this bill that seeks to amend the Constitution to allow for exactly that, implementation of the two-third gender principle. And one starts to wonder if Duale is saying that they might postpone the voting on this bill, what may have not happened.
I think there's a sense in which it's important to understand that this voting is taking place on the floor of the House. And if it's taking place on the floor of the House, it really has to benefit from a lot of understanding of how best you would find that the process, especially the voting, would be giving the desired result. I know that when we are talking about this bill, it is my honest view that the debate is taking place outside Parliament, and that in a number of cases it is taking place in context and information that is not clear. Most of the discussion right now is clouded with concern of abuse of a nomination process, and the concern has in a way stopped Kenyans from understanding that as a country we should be extremely embarrassed that a constitution that overwhelmingly received support in 2010 and an advisory opinion that was given in 2012, a time limit that was very clear for August 27, 2015, an extension by the August House that gave them, in line with the law, 1-year extension up to 2016, that at this point in time we should be worrying whether they are slay queens or if you're going to be getting that. You know, Sam, I think on a very, very serious note, and I would really want to thank, Honorable Martha Karua, because I think she's always stood on principle and been able to take a tough stand even when it wasn't popular. The conversation we should be having right now is the extent to which, as Kenyans, we would like to ignore a constitutional provision and ignore it without coming out to indicate any challenges and indicate that we would like perhaps to have a little more time so that we understand it. In other words, in my view, as we look at the gender bill and talk about its possibility of taking place on Wednesday or not, I think what I'd like to get us back on is an understanding that what we are talking about is an opportunity for members of Parliament whose duty was clearly defined as coming up with a mechanism to come out and indicate, okay, this is a mechanism that we would like to deal with, or we do not think this is the appropriate mechanism and this is how we would like to look at it. I don't think we would want to come round and spend time talking about slay queens and spend time trying to ask, do somebody deserve to get nominated, and spend time trying to ask who is it who decides, because I want to also remind them that President Uhuru himself was nominated. I want to remind Kenyans that Dr. Edgar Gachukia was nominated. As I sit here, I am nominated. A nomination is a very effective and expected way of election. It is a special election because usually the manner in which politics and campaigns, and we all know when we look at the way politics are done and people negotiate, that there would be possibility that those who have been elected or voted do not bring a considered value that is needed either by a particular party or by the country. So I want to urge Kenyans that it is important for us that our conversation be framed around our rule of law and the need that we need to cast our eye on making sure that people understand the rule of law, and then to ensure that we do not ridicule an extremely important tool that can allow us to develop leadership and provide direction.
And so, Joy, of course, there is a risk that should the bill be put on vote come come Wednesday, and there is no quorum of 233 members of parliament to start off the voting, then that opportunity is lost and can only be repeated 6 months from now. So from what you've been able to watch at the floor of the House, and also the things that the politicians have been saying, and especially members of parliament who sit in that House, do you think we have made so much progress to the point that there's a possibility of garnering 233 people, first of all, to vote, and then in support of the bill?
The threshold to change actually is that 233. So they must be at least 233 members who vote for it, for it to actually sail. And that means if the 233 make it to the House, they must all, to a man, vote for it, otherwise it fails. But I want to pick it up where Madam Professor has left it off. This conversation has been crowded by the nomination process as a whole. So now we are no longer talking about women representation in leadership. Now we are talking about, okay, fine, so even if we let them, who's going to get nominated? And that is losing the context. Because the context here is there has to be room for women to get nominated to these seats. Why? Because the Constitution says so. The drafters of the Constitution, and I was one of those people who was opposed to this Constitution because there were some of these gaps that were left. The mechanism was inserted in the county assemblies. It was inserted for the Senate. But because the members of parliament who were sitting then were direct beneficiaries of what was going to pass in the Constitution, they looked at it and they decided this is not going to be very good for us. And so they wrote something that made benefit to them because they wanted to increase the constituencies to 290. And they knew if they work it, the numbers for women also nominated, the members of parliament would be too many. And so they sort of stifled it so that Kenyans can buy it. Now Kenyans have bought it, we're in it. And in fact, I like the chronology that Madam has given us because it shows you the protracted journey that women have been taking to try and enforce this particular aspect of the Constitution. The thing that I don't get completely is to what benefit does this standoff give even our male counterparts? Because as you've correctly said, if it fails this time, it's coming again. It's not a conversation that is going away. This is one of those things I think we need to bite the bullet and just move forward. But I can see the wisdom in postponing it because right now as it is, and I was very surprised. You know, I thought with how long this conversation has gone on, they would be eager to look like they're on the right side of history and just pass it and get it out of the way. But when the discussion started, I realized, there's some people who are still so far down the corridor. I was actually, honestly, taken aback by that. And I realized, actually, if they put it on a vote on Wednesday, it's failing. That is fact, not fiction. Unless they do the abracadabra, they did the finance bill of the yeas, nays, yeas, and unless they do that, this is not going to pass. So in postponing it by an extra week, maybe PGs will be called, maybe there'll be private member lobbying, because as much as we talk about it out here, it's the people in parliament who have the responsibility of passing this particular bill. Is it the best bill? I don't think so. It has some weaknesses, but because it guarantees that we'll have that top-up facility, even if we fill it with slay queens, for now, let's start with that. Because if the slay queens are women, I'll take it. And then we'll iron it out as we move along. Because as professors also pointed out, there are some people who've been nominated who've been completely useless to the cause, but there are some people who've been nominated who have been absolutely excellent.
They're adding value.
Yes.
And of course, one of the issues that have been raised, and I was listening to Senator for Nandi, Samson Cherargei, he was saying that one of the, I almost said beef, but I won't say beef. I just did. One of the challenges that he's having with the bill is that doesn't allow for possibilities of moving amendments before the floor of the House. And of course, the Speaker of the National Assembly, Justin Muturi, when he was inviting debate into the bill, indicated that being a constitutional amendment bill, it cannot be amended on the floor of the House because it has gone through what she alluded to last week, that of public participation. So do you think that that argument holds water, and how then can that be addressed so that all these divergent views can be converged at a proper stage, so that the bill doesn't suffer the floor of the House because of such issues?
I think there is a sense in which it just requires that we understand that Parliament is a rule of law. I think, you know, same way if you're thinking about court or you're thinking about any other organized way of engagement, then you have to recognize that all members of parliament do know whenever you are dealing with amendments, if it's a constitutional amendment, or they do know that there is a sense in which if you would want to make any input, there is a stage where you do it. By the time we're getting into the second reading, and especially after it has gone to public participation and the 90 days has lapsed, you're not going to have that possibility because it just doesn't get done. And I think Sam, in my frustration in a way, but I also understand that this is part of how we have to look at context and look at the process, is that there seems to be some just lack of honesty on the one hand, and other level is really resistance and failure to come out and just indicate that, by the way, I'm just not ready for this. Because all members of parliament are aware, because this is not the first constitutional amendment bill we've had. Just the other day, the honorable member for Kiminini, Honorable Chris Mamalwa, who brought a bill that had been brought in the 11th parliament by Honorable Mdivo Cheng, with seeking to bring the election date forward. They know this is how it works. So I think as I look at this matter, I really do want, in particular, to speak to the women in Kenya, and I'm very glad that I'm here with Joy, governance expert, magistrate. I think there's a time, it is time for women of Kenya, especially professionals, to just stand up, get their voice, and talk. I have listened, and I'm telling you, over the weekend, I actually was quite glad. I said, this is good. I have been on this journey from 1992. I remember Mary Okello, a very renowned woman whose name everybody recognizes because of what she's done. There is absolutely nothing to apologize for when you mention Mary Okello's name. When you look at people like Eda Gachukia, because in 1992, as we were talking about the reform, as everybody was talking about Ford Kenya, I was privileged to get to look and realize that leadership is gender neutral. I looked at the whole thing and I was like, really? All this crap, I'm sorry to use that word, that people use on culture by trying to quote unquote declare that, oh, if you're born a girl, then you have these limitations if you're born. I was really just pleasantly surprised, and I was very happy, and that's why I'm even seated here, by the way, to get a point to say that, all right, look, leadership is a passion, concern about an idea, and you're going to get challenged. Some of that challenge will come of your gender, some will come because of your ability, some will come of your ethnic area, some will come, but you've got to stand up and fight. And I'm glad that this 2/3 gender bill has brought back an opportunity for us to talk to this issue. And I'm really inviting Kenyans, especially Kenyan professionals, wherever they are. They could be teachers, they could be lawyers. Let us not leave this conversation to be kept in the confines of politics, where there isn't even, in a number of cases, reasoning of context, and where there might not be political will to get this done. I think it is time that we were able to use evidence, as Joy indicated earlier, that women have leadership, that women can deliver, and that when it is that nominations are bundled, it is not women who do it. When nominations are bundled and you find that there are women who are brought on board, quote unquote, in some cases might not be qualified, I do not want to burden those women with shame. I do not see why all women should be lumped and blamed by this. I think when we look, we do not see, other than Honorable Martha Karua's political party, we do not see a political party where women are in leadership. So why are women now being told you are slay queens, you are not nominated toward? I really want to say, Sam, that I am very glad. I'm actually very happy that I'm not only in parliament at this particular time, but that we have had a situation that, in my view, has woken me up in particular. And I'm hoping all the other women will wake up and will say, we cannot in 2018 sit back and allow all the gains that we have made in bringing a clarity that leadership is gender neutral. But there are a few people who try to keep women down, and we allow women, even who are in parliament, to be ridiculed and to be laughed at, and look at our young girls who are just going to crawl back into hiding. So I think it is time that women actually showed evidence that they are able to lead.
Oh, Joy, before you go to the break, she makes a case of what women need to do, and some of them have been doing it over time, but still the path is rough. How do how does the country make sure that the male leadership or the male gender in this country appreciates that fact, and so that even as you go to the point of top-up nomination for the gender that will be disadvantaged, in this instance the female gender, how do you ensure that there's a cultural shift to the extent that people can begin to vote for women, or rather for candidates regardless of their gender, and of course not disadvantaging women?
We are the ones who chose the hard road. Because ideally, society should evolve and then the law follows. But we chose the activist route where we put in the law and force society to get into the mold. And that's why we've struggled so hard with this. And that's why even if it is in the law, Kenyans are still like, you know what, we don't care. This is not what we want right now. Because forget even about what's happening in Parliament. If you even have a conversation with General Wananchi, many people are not in favor of this bill. They're like, what ridiculousness is this? And when you hear such sentiments, it tells you society is still not where Professor and I are on women leadership. Because as far as they're concerned, these women have a lot and they're still not they're not satisfied.
Right.
It's a quintessential discussion of, I mean, if you give a woman a little bit, she'll want more, she'll want more. It's like the gold digger mentality. And I think it's something that is unfortunate, but there's nothing we can do about it. The alternative would be to behave like the United States and the other countries where they have let their women leadership evolve organically. Such that Angela Merkel has just worked through her political career until now she's chancellor, or Theresa May has worked through the political party until now she's prime minister. Because that has its merit, because any woman who sits at the top, and look even at the UK, for example, they have Theresa May and they have Nicola Sturgeon. Both are women and they're both in power. And it's nobody can contest that they are there because they are slay queens or that they slept with who to the top. No, they have been in the trenches in the party, and so that's the benefit of allowing culture to evolve organically and to arrive at a conclusion. But we chose the hard one, and we decided to climb a glass mountain on a rainy day. And that means we will be climbing and we'll slide back down and climb and slide back down. But there is something that was said in this studio by your, I think you call it the press gang.
Yes, gang.
And I think it was Lina Skekai who made the point and said, you know what, it is wrong to judge women gains in Kenya on this one gender bill. Women have made great strides across the board. Even in this election, we have more women elected. We actually have senators elected, we have governors elected, something that was not there in the previous house. So even in terms of elections for women leadership, we are seeing some progress. And he made a point and he said, look, even if this bill fails, he does not think it is the death knell to the women progression towards attaining gender parity and to women ascending to greater spaces of power. And that's a point I wish our listeners would not lose. That look, even if they defeat this bill, guess what? We are coming back stronger than ever. Like Professor said, women deliver. There's 7 billion people in the world. That is proof that women deliver. All of them came by a woman. So they need to give us our space.